Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mystery Theory podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a really kind of different case compared to the ones that I've shared in this podcast before. I think that also we can learn something from this horrible thing that happened to Lindsay Hawker and use it in the future as something that could help us. I don't want to call it a cautionary tale because nobody should have to go through something like that for other people to learn. But I feel like sometimes we're too naive to see some things, especially when we travel. And it also kind of depends on where you were born, how sheltered you were, or still are, and the kind of street smart that comes from traveling and from living in less than perfect circumstances. And the story starts like the beginning of one of my favorite movies, which is Taken. But I think I like that movie because of the ending. And in this case, there was nothing that could have been done. So instead of a good movie, it's like a worst case scenario. Really did happen to somebody. And not only for Lindsay, but her family, her friends, her peers. Now, I am not going to go too deep into Lindsay's life. I'm only going to share some relevant facts so you have a better idea of the kind of girl she was. But I think the developing of the story, the different cultures and laws, that is where we are going to spend most of the time in this case. So Lindsay Hawker lived in Coventry, which is a city in central England. She was the second born of 3 girls. She went to King Henry VIII school and ended up studying biology at the University of Leeds, where she graduated with honors in 2006. Now, right after graduating in October of 2006, she was only 21 years old when she decided to move to Tokyo to teach English. Now, this was not a kind of a small business kind of thing, or I'm going to go and try to be a teacher. No, she was going to be employed by Japan's largest private English conversation school. And the idea was to stay for about a year. Now, she was not living alone. A lot of girls do this. She had a couple of roommates, and they were also teachers coming from other countries to teach English there. And according to her family, she was not only teaching, which was her passion, but she was also having a lot of fun. She would contact her family every day, tell them about her day, the new culture that she was introducing herself into, and overall how she was doing. It was important for her to let them know every day how she was doing. You have to understand that having your kid in another country, no matter if they're old enough to travel and make their own decisions, it's a scary thing. So I think that she was not only keeping in touch because she missed her family and friends and boyfriend, but she was also trying to put them at ease by letting them know that she was not only working and making money, but she was also having fun. Now, Lindsay, as I mentioned, she had a boyfriend back home, and she, at some point, she would talk to him very often, if not every day, every other day. She would also write to him, leave voice messages, and there was an instance where she mentioned something to him. I think it was over an email, where she said that I think the email was sent on March 20th, 2007. Okay, so she moved there in October 2006. She was doing fine until that time, March 20th, 2007, when she shared with her boyfriend that there was this kind of creepy guy that approached her when she was on her way back home after work. Now you're probably like me thinking, I mean, isn't that crazy? I would be freaking out if there was a guy following me. I'd be calling the police, I'd be getting inside a coffee shop or something, but apparently this guy didn't seem very, I don't know how to call it, maybe like a criminal, and maybe harmless. So while she was on the train, she's telling this to her boyfriend that this guy came up to her and introduced himself as a student. Then after the conversation, she realized that he was not a student of hers, and the guy ended up following her all the way home, where he asked for water. She invited him in as later on is described as a precaution, and introduced this guy to her roommates. I mean, in my opinion, the guy is kind of a creep. I don't care how harmless the guy looks, how I don't know. I guess harmless is the right description. I don't care how harmless he looked. Just following somebody all the way back home. I don't know, but there's more to that I'll share in the end. Now, the guy kept insisting in taking classes with her. He wanted to learn English. He, at some point, said that he wanted to move to America, and so he needed to dominate the language before moving, and I guess he spent all the time while he was following her asking to take some classes with her. Once he got to the apartment, she went to grab some water. The guy started drawing a picture of her, and he signed his name, his phone number, and he put there his email. Now, Lindsay ended up agreeing to teach him English, but she was concerned for her safety in a very mild level, I'm assuming. So she decided to meet him in a public place. I've read different things. There was this thing on, I think it was on the Wikipedia, that said that this was okay to do, like meet somebody out of the classroom just to teach them, like in a coffee shop or something. And I read in other articles that was not okay, and that a lot of girls did this because they needed extra money. Yes, they were making money by teaching, and it was good money, but rents were expensive, and overall, your daily life, it gets expensive. So a lot of girls take jobs on the side. I can't really confirm either of those, but I thought I'd mention them both just in case you already heard about this story. I couldn't confirm any theory. Once I found a little documentary that featured in it Lindsay's story, it was about other girls too. They just didn't go into that detail. But remember that she mentions this to her boyfriend on March 20th or so, and the meeting took place on Saturday, March the 24th, 2007. After that meeting on Sunday, when she was supposed to call her family, she never did. Now, her family thought that maybe she was having too much fun, maybe she was too busy, maybe she picked up an extra shift. They didn't know what to think. So they waited. 2 days later, the school where she was working at called her parents to let them know that Lindsay hadn't been showing up for work. She didn't show up on March the 25th, which again was supposed to be that Sunday, and she didn't show up to work on Monday, which was the 26th. So the family immediately reported her missing to the authorities and to the embassy, while her family made arrangements to travel to Tokyo immediately. Now, the first thing that the authorities did was to go and check on where she was staying. So her apartment, her roommates, and kind of go from there. Once you get there, the police gets there, the roommates mention this creepy guy. Now, haven't mentioned his name, but the guy that followed her from her job to the house and drew the picture. The creepy guy. His name is Tatsuya Ichihashi, and they did know that Lindsay agreed to meet with the guy, and after that, she never came back. So the police immediately had something to go with and from, I guess. So they go to his apartment, and they get there by almost 6 o'clock in the afternoon. But for some weird reason, they couldn't even knock without a cause, or what they called a citation. So they peeked through the window and saw that somebody was inside. However, because of how the laws work there, they couldn't even knock. And the guy, Tatsuya, knew. So they waited, and they ended up getting back up around 7 p.m. when they brought this citation needed to even knock on his door. Now, this guy Tatsuya opens the door, and by the way, he was about 5 years older than Lindsay, okay? Just keep that in mind, because I think that when you hear the word student, maybe you assume a teenager, but this guy was 5 years older than Lindsay. And according to the police, this guy knew that he was in trouble, and the officer grabbed him. But apparently he grabbed him from his gym bag that he was carrying, like he was gonna go to the gym. So this sounds like a really bad Jackie Chan movie where the guy lifts his shoulder and leaves the officer with the bag instead of, he was not grabbing the guy from his hand. So, or arm, I should say. So this was in the 4th floor, and you'd think, well, somebody's downstairs, they can tell them, and they can grab him. Sadly, and this is according to the family, they didn't have radios to tell them that this guy Tatsuya ended up running into the crowd. So by the time they figure out that the guy was running, it's already in a crowd of people, and they just couldn't find him. Now, this sounds terrible for the authorities, and it really is, because I think that once you have a suspect, once they took the time to get that citation, I mean, it all seems like a really bad movie. So they go inside his apartment with that citation, and they found Lindsay. She was inside a bathtub, and the bathtub was moved to his balcony. So it was outside. She was partially covered with sand, soil, and different chemicals. Later on, we find out that the combination that he was using was to try to decompose her body faster. Her head was also shaved, so she had no hair. Now, mind you, this was a horticulture student, and he had to find all these things to actually make it work as he thought that he could, but the police got there way faster than he anticipated. Now, you must understand that this is a horrific scene, but I think that what is more scary is the idea that this guy who did this horrible torture and just he disappeared. So the police decided to put his face everywhere. I mean, his name and his face were in all kinds of flyers and all kinds of lists, and one in particular that it was nationwide. The authorities believe that he was either living in the streets as a homeless guy, or that he was working with some kind of a fake ID. They knew that he technically couldn't leave the country because they had his passport. So initially they believed that he was still in the country. Now this went on for months, that became years. The police investigated and traced back the sand and the chemicals and the soil that he was using on top of Lindsay's body, and tried to follow every single piece of physical evidence. But they were getting nowhere. So, in the meantime, they released pictures of this guy, and not only his regular pictures, like they've been doing, but also some of him disguised as a woman. I've never heard of that before, to be honest. I think that it's a pretty bold thing to do, and I am not even sure how they pulled that off, to be honest. I'm assuming by computer and by changing certain features and things, but they also decided to release his drawings to see if somebody recognized them, or at least that style. I mean, he must be hiding somewhere, and he must be in contact with somebody, so they have to keep digging. Finally, in 2008, the police ends up interviewing some people from... There's this place, I guess, I don't know, they describe it as the sections of Kabukicho, which is a popular place where homosexuals will find partners. I really didn't want to dig on that, but there was somebody from that frequented that place that said that this guy was the partner of one of them. But still, even if he was a partner of somebody in the area, the police couldn't find him there. Then there were some rumors that he committed suicide. And the family was really frustrated because really they thought that the police were trying to find an excuse to just close this investigation. Another rumor then that he fled to the Philippines. But you have to understand that a lot of the things that the police were thinking and trying was because they knew that he had the means to do a lot of things that other people with no money wouldn't. His parents, the dad was a surgeon, was a brain surgeon, and the mom was a dentist. So they believed that he had the means, that he had the money, or that he could ask for help in order to start a new life. But they wouldn't give up. So the police did something that really, you tell me if you ever heard of this before, but they released life-size cutouts of this guy Ichihashi. I mean, really. I've never even heard of that before. Okay, I mean, what difference does it make? I don't know, but it actually worked. Because in June of 2009, they ended up raising more money as a cash reward for information leading to his arrest, and a few people started calling the line, and it was actually him. Not the one that called, but it was, these people actually knew where he was. On November 4th, 2009, police disclosed that he disguised himself by undergoing plastic surgeries. He removed a mole that he had. He folded his eyes a little bit more, and he changed his nose. Thanks to this guy that worked with him in a construction place for about, I think it was about 14 months, he ended up being captured on November 10th, 2009 while he was trying to run away in a ferry to Okinawa. He didn't confess initially. I mean, he was charged with abandoning a body, then he was charged with rape, and then he was charged with murder. The trial was a mess, to be honest. All I read about it is that, like in most cases, lawyers saying that the police was making him confess that it was not true what he said, but actually he was in distress, and that's why he ended up confessing later on. In the end, things looked really, really bad for him. So he actually confessed. He said that it was never his intention to kill her. And when she actually died, he tried to resuscitate her. I mean, he goes on and he explains how it went down. I mean, he apparently suffocated her to keep her quiet while he was raping her. And my gosh, this is one of those things that it really bothers me, because you have to listen to this guy say, well, I didn't mean to kill her. I was just suffocating her because she was making too much noise. He didn't say it with that words, but that's basically what he said, that she wouldn't stay quiet, so he had to do that. but he never meant for her to die. What was he expecting? A please and thank you from Lindsay? I mean, really? What was he thinking? His logic makes no sense whatsoever, and it kind of makes me mad just to think about it. In some articles, I found that they claim that he tortured her so she would agree to have sex with him. And that is why she was missing her hair and had signs of torture. A lot of these horrible things that happened to her was while she was alive. So it would only make sense that he'd ask for things that she didn't want to give him, so he would continue to do these things, horrible things to her, in order for her to say yes. I don't know if that really is what happened, because as I said, I'm going through articles because there's nothing with many details in it. The Hawker family, of course, requested the death penalty, but here's the kicker. The court thought that he was young enough to be rehabilitated, so they didn't include the death penalty, but he ended up being sentenced to life in prison. Yeah. I can't even put myself in the shoes of her family. And I guess that's where the second part of this podcast starts, because I started reading about, that's the case, that's what happened, but I started reading about a lot of European girls that travel to Japan to make money. Every year there are thousands of them that work, and they come from different places. Don't get me wrong, it's not only European girls, but there's a big the majority comes from Europe. I was reading this article that explained a little bit of what they call the real deal. Going to teach English is one of the things that is well paid. But there are also other things that you can do if you don't want to teach English. Like, you can be a hostess at bars. And according to this article, there are some hostesses that are kind of replacing the old geisha kind of days. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, these hostesses are expected to talk to these guys, light their cigarettes, drink with them, sing karaoke, dance. And according to this series of articles, I should say, nothing more. No sex, no touching, nothing 100% inappropriate according to how they described it. But apparently there is a fascination with Western women and Japanese men. They not only find them tall, beautiful, with character, some of them a little bit bossy. Ladies that have their own will. And you only have to be human, to possess all those things. But hey, I'm not judging. According to this, Japanese men are very, very attracted to Western women because of that. Now, if you're wondering why, well, according to this article and kind of pointing out the differences in cultures, they said that, Japanese girls are taught to be the complete opposite of what I just mentioned to you. Women in Japan, they are treated. I kind of made a point to add the treated part there because according to this article, women in Japan are second-class citizen. And I just want to think that they're treated that way. And not because they are considered that. And according to them, they should stay there. You know? They should be respectful. They should be quiet. They should be totally the opposite. Have no mind of their own. And I'm not saying that every Japanese girl is that way. But if you compare how they're raised with girls from other countries, then you can see a difference. At least in the way that they were raised. When they grow up, I don't know if they make up their own minds and change, but really, they're expected to be the complete opposite of Western women. And ladies from other countries are treated like goddesses, just because they don't follow their Japanese traditions. They're the complete opposite of the Japanese ladies. So they, according to this article, the guys love it. They love this completely opposite behavior from Western women, but they wouldn't want their wives to behave that way. So it's almost like a contradiction. This is what I want, but this is what I like. I want my wife to be this way, to be submissive, to be quiet, to listen to me. But I want a girl with an attitude, with, a complete different physical appearance. But I wouldn't want to marry her. And I guess that's pretty normal in a lot of ways, and I'm not going to get into that. We're just talking about differences in culture. So, I even read this article that said that Japanese men usually are very, powerful men that goes to these bars. I mean, that they're expensive. They expect only kind of rich men to go to these places where these hostesses are. This is not going to be for your typical Japanese hardworking men, but mostly for rich and powerful guys. So they read about how they can make themselves more attractive to these Western girls, and so they let the top of their heads a little bit longer, and they cut only the sides so they would appear to look taller. I mean, really? Okay. Really. Silly stuff, if you ask me. Because if you're a 45-year-old man or 55-year-old man looking to impress an 18-year-old Western girl, I don't know if letting your hair grow in the top would help you. I mean, sorry. That's just my thoughts. Sometimes it's kind of hard to understand the big differences that we have with each other when we look at the world as one place. And if you lived your entire life in the United States or in Canada, once you get out of that bubble, and I'm saying this in a very respectful way, but if you live in America and you travel to Colombia, or you travel to Argentina, or you travel to any country in Asia, soon enough you realize that we're not the same. That our political and cultural differences are huge. And that we might have an idea of something or a place that we idolize in our head, and we thought that was this beautiful place with warm and sweet people. But once you get there, you realize that there's a lot more. And in some places, it's more visible than others. I have to speak for myself here when I say that I was raised and I lived for 18 years in a tiny country in South America where I was never robbed. I was never, there's a lot of, I was never kidnapped or anything like that. And I lived for 18 years. But I remember the first time that I rode the bus by myself. I remember everything that I could do and everything that I couldn't do. I couldn't wear my best shoes. I couldn't wear my best clothes if I was going to go out at night. I couldn't use something like a Walkman because at the time I got my first cell phone when I was 22 years old, so that should give you a hint. But if I was using my Walkman or if I just simply couldn't, because they will be able to see if somebody wanted to rob me, they'll be able to see that I was listening to something, and I would put myself in a situation where people maybe would want something from me. So you get used to it. You're probably listening to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's not way of living, that it's horrible. But that's all you know. If you were raised there, then that's all you know. And it becomes a normal thing. When you go out, then you make sure you're not wearing your best shoes. When you are going out to a club or you're going somewhere, you never carry a purse. You never accept a drink from anybody. You take your own drinks with you if you want to drink inside the club or something. You carry a knife, and you learn a few things that are really important to keep yourself safe. And listen, nothing ever happened to me in the 18 years that I lived in that country. But what I'm saying is that I knew how to stay away from trouble. I knew what I could do and I knew what I couldn't do. And so, if somebody coming from another country was to do the same, ride the same bus to go to the same place by me, they probably were listening to their Walkmans and they probably were using their best shoes, and that doesn't mean that they were gonna get robbed, but they had more chances. Am I saying that you have to be scared every time you travel around the world? No, I'm just saying be smart. Protect yourself. Understand that it may not be your reality where you live in that particular place in Kansas City or in LA or that tiny town with 100 people that you live in. That is not your reality, and you shouldn't have to know things. But please, when you travel, do your homework and realize that there are going to be a few things that are going to be completely different. And in order to keep yourself safe, you have to understand them. Am I saying that this is Lindsay's fault? That if she did her homework, she could have done something? No, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that we can't change what happened to Lindsay and her family, and that I hope it never happens again, and that I hope that this is one of a kind story that will never repeat. But sadly, it keeps happening. Years before Lindsay, it was Karida from Australia. And after that, there was another girl called, her name was Lucy, black man. And I mean, those two were even related to the perpetrator. And this is a story that it's almost like repeating itself continuously. So all I'm saying to you who are lucky enough to live in a place where you don't have to think about those things, to please do your homework before you travel. Please do travel, because traveling will open up your mind and will show you that the world is such a wonderful place, and that we can all be entitled to our own opinions and our own ways. And it's wonderful to see how other governments and other cities and other towns and other places work. It's one of the things that you cannot learn from a book. So you have to go, you have to live it, you have to experience it, you have to talk to the locals, you have to eat their food, and you have to immerse yourself in this new culture that you're going to, even if it's for a week. But please understand that it's not the same place that you're living at home. That most people in some countries can't even leave their house at night because they're afraid that somebody's gonna get in and rob them. And you probably can leave your house alone for weeks or months while you are on a trip and nothing is gonna happen to it. What am I saying with all this? This is the way that things are. There's going to be evil people everywhere. We talk about evil people in America all the time. And we talk about evil people in other countries as well. But I think we are so used to the amount of serial killers and murderers that are here in America every single year that we don't understand that in other places it happens. But it happens in different ways, and it happens even more if you are a naive tourist who expected the best. And in most cases, that's gonna be okay. You're not gonna run into somebody who's gonna want to rape you and kill you. But what if you run into the wrong people? What if? I'm going to finish this podcast with something that it kind of reminded me, this case, which was, I've been following Lily Whispers on YouTube since she was about, I don't know, I think she had 2,000 subscribers. I remember she had a little fish. She was asking for even recommendations for a name. And, you know, I remember that she went to Barcelona to study abroad, and she said that, you know, they stole her phone from a taxi, and, you know, things that she couldn't do or say in the bus because, you know, there's what we call pungas back home, which is people that their job is to get in the bus, to cut your purse and take your money. And how horrified she was about this. And now, if you know anything about Barcelona, that's what they are mostly known for, as far as bad things, you know. I would say soccer is the most well-known thing that they have, but as far as the unpopular things that they're known for, that's one of those. And I guess that the younger that you are, the less that you care the differences between, and you assume that things are pretty much the same. But I also remember her on that video saying that people take naps and that they will close their shops just to go have lunch and then take a nap, and then they will reopen again. And that to me is perfectly normal because I was raised in a country where that's the norm. You close at 1 p.m., you have lunch, you take a nap for about 2 hours, and then you reopen your shop. To me, that's normal. To her, that was something out of the ordinary and completely different. What am I saying again? We're all different. And some of the things that other people don't worry about in their countries, we're worrying here in America every single day. Sometimes we're worried about things that they're out of our control. And maybe we don't have those little criminals in the buses, but we have other problems. And in this case, this horrible problem ended up taking the life of a beautiful girl, a young girl who's just trying to earn money and who happened to be there for a short period of time. And this is what it ended up happening. So am I saying you shouldn't trust anybody? No. Pretty sure you are smart enough to make your own decisions, but I'm just saying, do your homework when you go out. When you go to a different part of the States, like you live in the northern part and you go down south. When you are down south and you go up north. When you travel to Mexico. It is right there, so close, yet so different. And try to instill these things into our kids. Because they're not immune to it. Even though they think they are, they're not immune to these things. It happens to everyone else but them. No, not really. It can happen to anybody. And in this case, today there's a family who's missing this beautiful young girl who was supposed to have the rest of her life ahead of her. And this is what ended up happening. Just a horrible nightmare that I truly wish doesn't happen again. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for requesting this specific case. And I hope that we all learned something new, or at least I helped you think about some things that you haven't thought of before. Talk to you guys next week. Bye, guys.